Hello and welcome to the Real Biz Life Chronicles, where we discuss all things business, branding, and life. I'm your host, Tracy Fryer. Now, my guest today, this is our third time lucky, and believe it, the second tech issue that we've had, but we will not be defeated. We are definitely going to have this episode. I met this lovely lady at the Destiny Rescue Breakfast. She was a presenter there, and I thought, number one, I have to get to know this beautiful lady. And number two, I have to introduce her to the Real Biz Life Chronicles podcast audience. Kim Lancer is the founder of the Tall Poppies, a global leadership development firm that empowers leaders to stand tall and accelerate their success. Kim Lancer, welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. Third time's a charm. So it's beautiful to be here.
Yes, I'm so happy we finally made it. I can see you now. You can hear me. There's no more drama happening. So we made it. Kim, I'd love for you to share with our audience, where did your business journey start?
Started in New York. I was just thinking business journey, but actually business could be my whole career. So I've been coaching, doing leadership development for 20 years. But the Tall Poppies business started in New York when, after being there 11 years, I decided I was going to move home to Perth, and I really missed it. And I really wanted to set up a business doing coaching and leadership in the way that I thought would serve best, really. And I'd been doing it in two different continents then, so I had lots of themes. So I do what I love to do, which is I journal a lot. So I went away for a weekend by myself, left the kids at home, and my husband wrote Dear Diary, maybe with or without a cocktail, and dreamt of setting up the business. That's how I named it that weekend. It was going to be Tall Poppies Leadership, because I wanted to flip the whole script on this Tall Poppies culture that I was about to move home to.
Yes.
Such a long period of time. And I really wanted to solve this problem that I'd seen around people not really being confident, and not being confident in really impressive companies at really senior levels, and still it was a thing. So that's where I thought about, okay, we're going to, create this feeling of the importance of standing tall, the importance of having confidence. So, and then we had a bit of a, holiday as we arrived back in Perth, and then it all started from there, which was 5 years ago now.
And so you're originally from Perth. What made you go overseas?
I think probably because I lived in Holland for a year first. So I actually went and lived in London just after I'd finished Kern. But I think really what got me there is probably doing a year of exchange when it was the year after year 12. And so I lived in Holland. I had a completely different way of living and being. I was in a Dutch school. And when I came back from that, I just remember that Perth and my friends and just things weren't the same. So that probably implanted a thought, after university, going to London and just exploring, how do other people do this thing called life and work? And it's not only the Aussie way or the Perth way. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I haven't immigrated a few times. I get exactly what you mean as well. It's like when I go back to South Africa and I see the people who haven't sort of left, you realize that your mindset is so different, and your perspective on life, because you have seen how people live across the board.
Yeah. Which is a bit like travel too. Yeah. For those who love travel, like once you do travel, that's it. It's just a part of you, and you're always looking for variation and different perspective. But I completely understand that's not what everyone is intrigued.
Yeah. And Kim, you mentioned something that I'm a massive fan of. Could you please share your journaling practice and how it sort of changed your day-to-day being?
Oh, journaling, you said?
Yeah.
When did journaling start? I remember as a kid writing, Dear Diary. I know that I like to think a lot, Tracy.
Same.
And I just remember being very reflective as a kid and quite caring. And so I think if you're caring, actually, you take on your other friends' problems.
Yes.
You take on a lot, you're thinking through a lot. So I was a little counselor as a friend, like many people are. Yeah. And I remember having diaries, like the old school ones with the lock.
Yeah, I had one as well.
From then, yeah. And I find writing things down gives me like tremendous headspace. So I can actually picture it. I'm really visual. So I picture it leaving my head. I get tremendous clarity from writing. And I've just kept it going. Even memories. at the end of the year, all the times I write bullet points from holidays, what I'm thinking of. I started doing one for my daughter,
Oh,
like
great.
dear diary just to her.
Oh, that's
And
lovely.
I think it has a huge impact because it gives you greater clarity so that you can actually be very focused. And also it honors your emotions.
Yes.
You know, we're sort of taught to just keep pushing through or suppress sometimes, but
Mm.
it's really honest to write what's actually happening, feel cleansing, and then move on. So, yeah.
Yeah, I find it so powerful. I'd love to know the one that you've started for your daughter. Is that kind of, I guess, your experience with having a daughter? Is that for her to kind of read and reflect down the track, or?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have one for me where
Oh,
I'm writing
great.
about the business and I talked to my coach and what it's like to have a daughter. And I wrote that, the night before I had her, the
Oh,
first
wow.
day, everything. And then I thought, what if I wrote one to her of, this is what you're doing, here's what we did today. And then I could give it
Mm.
her 21st birthday and she could look back.
Oh, that's a beautiful idea. Love that.
So I just need to keep going another, 19 years.
Not far to go. And Kim, so walk us through. You came back to Australia. What happened then?
Came back to Australia, loved being home. Everyone at the time was like, why would you leave New York? And everyone asked me that here.
Mm.
But loved it, knew that this is where I wanted to be. First, honestly, we thought about making sure my family, who are all American and we just moved from the other side of the world, were happy.
Yeah.
So that was, how are they at school? I've got two boys. Now they're 20 and 15, but 5 years ago. So school, same with my husband, how's he going to get a job? How are we going to get friends? All of that thing, just what you do when you move
Yeah.
back.
Mm.
Business wise, I landed and was like, right, we've got to get started. And I think there's extra pressure because he didn't have a job and we had just moved countries. So I
Mm.
just went networking everywhere. I talked to everyone. I told everyone, this is what I've done. Here's my experience. This is what I'm great at. And I'd love to do it. And just boom.
Yeah.
So coffees, network, everything you can imagine, nonstop talking about, what you want to do. And then beautiful things happened. I think you get introduced to the right people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did get introduced to some good companies early on who have stayed 5 years later and been some
Oh,
of our
fantastic.
clients. But they were all through organic meetings as such.
Mm.
Like I remember doing something for charity, talking about that, really connecting with an American woman who just moved here and she was having a hard time, having coffee with her, giving her advice because I'd been coaching and did women's leadership. And then she happened to know somebody and introduced me, and that turned into a long-term relationship. So
Right.
I was also trying to find myself back because you're Australian. So people think, oh, you're home again. But I hadn't lived here for 20 years. And obviously, New York and London, totally different pace and world.
Completely.
Just like all my friends, I'd left doing training and development for a different global company. So it was all very new,
Mm.
super exciting and super busy.
Yeah.
Boom, make it happen, high stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your husband came with you and your two stepsons, did you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alex and Riley, we all moved over when they were, 10 and 15. Yeah, so primary school, high school, yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a big I remember when I immigrated, well, the first time I was still, I think it was end of primary school, and it's such a big sort of transition, when you do immigrate also.
Mm. How was it for you?
I mean, at the time it was quite daunting because you have to, I mean, my
Yeah,
parents immigrated 4 times. So it made me,
yeah,
whilst it was difficult, it made me very flexible. I said that's what sort of helped me with my networking,
yeah,
my early
yeah,
networking days. And, I love meeting new people and expanding my network. So I think in
yeah,
some ways I kind of owe it to that. Whilst it was quite hard at the time because you have to leave friends and,
yeah,
leave your comfort zone every time. It has really, I think, as an adult, really helped.
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And can walk us through being part of a blended family. What is that like?
It is beautiful and complex at the
Yeah.
same time. Um, yeah, probably because I just did maybe the way it happened. I was at the time I was living in New York. single, met my husband, fell crazy in love.
Huh.
He was like, this is amazing. And, and I've been married and I have 2 children, which
Yeah.
isn't like in honesty the way everyone pictures it.
No.
You picture you create it all from scratch, all of it. So from that moment, a little bit later, then suddenly I moved from New York. I had this tiny little apartment, like tiny, didn't cook, like paper in the oven, like proper Sex in the
I
City
was just
stuff.
going to say,
Like,
Sex in the City.
no food, no, tiny, tiny. And I went from that life where, 10 minutes away were all the banks, where I was doing the coaching, very glamorous kind of lifestyle, to living in the suburbs of Philadelphia in this beautiful place called Yardley, to waking up in the morning, like moving in with the boys straight away. So suddenly I had kids. So you become an instant mum, because they were living with my husband already, like 80% of the time. And there was Lego on the floor, and I had to make Vegemite, well, not Vegemite there, but, little sandwiches where like, so it's very different in an immediate way.
Yeah. It would be.
Yeah. And then it's all you're learning so much as well, because you're raising children. And then I dared to dream, could we raise and have this family in this place that, I think is amazing for families, and we'd just be surrounded by family. And then years later, I always wanted a girl. So it was beautiful to have, a girl 2 years ago, Aviana.
Yeah.
And now it's this big age range, which is really like surprising to people, like a 20-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's a
I know
weird
a few people like
thing
that.
to
Yeah.
go through too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So lots of different identities.
And I guess, Kim, when you did go from sort of that, single life, Sex in the City, all the way to, suddenly be married and being a mom, because it is very common nowadays. I mean, it doesn't, like you said earlier, it doesn't always happen, the way we think you're going to start from scratch.
Yeah.
What's some advice you maybe give someone who is in that position, who has no idea when it comes to being a mom? They kind of, fell madly in love with their partner. What advice would you give them?
It's funny. Sometimes I think about that, Tracy, because I wonder like how much more I could have read about having a blended family then. I just wonder, because they're all the things that I read now.
Yeah.
The things that I'm aware of now, and the different emotions and complexity. And so part of me wants to say, well, read about a blended family and where the kids might be thinking and what you step into, and your situation is so unique as well. And then another part of me thinks that probably, like all families, no one exactly understands your family. Just like I remember I went from all the time I was, delivering workshops, I never could relate to parents because I didn't have kids. So it was later in my life, and it was just a whole spectrum where I did not relate. Same with my friends, actually.
Yeah.
None of them had kids. And then suddenly I had children, so my life had changed, and I would talk about them and relate. But then people would put lots of labels and talk about having stepchildren, and then I wasn't a real mom, and not intentionally, but just because there is a version of stepmumming that's you visit them once every, month, or you visit them every weekend. And I was experiencing something where my whole life was mumming now. So I felt like, no, I'm mumming. So part of my advice would be around, and that used to hurt my feelings a lot, actually, how different people would interpret what I was doing and label and be like, yeah. So maybe the advice would be read a little bit, but not a lot. And it's enough what you're doing, and it's beautiful, and to be resilient around it as well. Like you get to create something that nobody quite understands, but it is tricky.
Yeah.
It's a very complex situation to be in, as I now know. Because kids are going through their own emotions, and your partner's going through their own emotions, and versus completely building what you want from scratch. I just think that's honestly true.
Yeah, there's a lot to kind of navigate. It's not just, like you said, straightforward. There's a whole different dynamic to it as such.
Yeah. I think divorce does that too. Like when that brings in different emotions. So if you've been through it, you might experience it, but the way you experience it for everyone is completely different, even though there's some sort of commonality. So don't pretend, just try and figure whatever it out it is for you.
Yeah. And Aviana gets on well with her brothers now, and vice versa?
Yeah, that's actually gorgeous. Yeah, because I wasn't sure, teenage boys, are they going to be like, what am I going to do with a 2-year-old?
Yeah.
But it turns out it softened our whole house and it
Oh,
brings this feminine energy in, and they take care of her, and they're learning amazing things for boys growing up in the
mm,
world, parenting and brothers. And suddenly there's 5 of us.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's a really nice dynamic.
Yeah. And Kim, I'd love to know, besides a blended family, first, what's the bravest and then what's the craziest thing you've ever done?
Bravest, brave, I probably think back to when I was young around. I think it seems kind of brave to want to go live in Holland at the time, which I didn't know
Definitely.
where it was. And I wasn't 18 yet. And to stay there for a year, and
Mm.
they didn't speak English. And yeah, and actually, you couldn't even pick where you went. So I lived in this tiny little village that literally was the stereotype of Holland, which is not true for all of Holland, where there's a dike, there's a cow, there's cascades. That was really brave. Like,
Yeah.
can't remember my headspace then to leave this and comfort and go live in a tiny town with, yeah, no cinema and all those sorts of
Yeah. And
things.
so young as well.
And young, yeah.
Mm.
So it was probably brave then to move to London, which lots of people do, and then to move to New York too. Like starting from fresh does take some courage.
Yes.
Like it probably seems easier after a while too, but when you look back, you're like, oh, yeah, that was brave.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't
Definitely.
know it's going to turn out yet. You have this
No.
total faith that it will. I'm just going to do it. And you create community, everything from nothing,
Yeah.
just like you have too.
Mm. And in your, I guess, moving experiences of going to Holland and New York, have you ever found, because I guess when we are making a big decision, like you said, we do have that faith that it's going to all work out. Has there ever been an instance where it hasn't quite gone according to plan, or do you find it always works out?
And moving, I feel probably strongly in my bones that if you do something, you can navigate it and make it
Mm.
okay. The only thing that comes to mind is what I thought it might be like, because I did consider another move after I'd been in New York back, early on,
Yeah.
about living in Hong Kong. So
Okay.
I had a vision of Hong Kong, it'd be amazing to just experience Asia as well, then, all of the continents. And I just got to Hong Kong and I, I, I didn't like the feel of it.
Yeah.
It felt really small.
Mm.
And so in my mind, it didn't work out as in I'd thought it could be this beautiful place. I got there and I did not have the same feeling I had about London or New York. Both of those cities, I arrived, I could just feel the energy and I could dream and picture my life.
Mm.
Whereas it felt insular in Hong Kong. And so it
Yeah.
didn't work out as a dream, but instead, it evolves to something else. And I stayed in New York a little bit longer and then I moved home.
And it sounds like you're very, a bit like myself, a bit intuition based in how something would feel for you in making
Yes.
decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like the energy that people give you, the knowledge of yourself,
Mm.
like knowing that you're off. I follow my instinct far more in business now, which still it's only 5 years into this space, but coaching is a very observation intuitive space as well, like reading
Yes.
people and trying to hold the space for them and listen. So I often think for business owners, just listening to our own voice is really important. I try and dial into mine as to, yes, we would partner really well, or no, something's just not there. I don't need to describe it on paper.
Yeah. I've had
And
that
the
before.
right people find each other.
Yeah, definitely. And were you always wanted to be in the leadership space when you were growing up?
No,
Mm.
no. Once upon a time, I was going to run 800 meters and 1500 at the Olympics. Actually a very good
Bold.
runner. So I had my own running coach.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I really thought about that. I don't know if this happens to a lot of people, but I remember telling that to my doctor at the time when I was young, and he laughed. Like I told him I will be in the Olympics, and I
And he
just
just
remember,
laughed.
yeah, that he laughed back as if, don't be silly. So I remember,
Wow.
right?
It's a dream building. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure I got way more determined at the time because it's a memory that sticks in my mind. I would have
Yes.
trained harder and kept doing it. And then I would have changed my mind. No, leadership development. I just knew when I was living here, whilst during university and everything, that I was quite curious,
Hmm.
and I really liked people. So initially, I studied journalism because I thought about that space as in, well, that's a communication, caring, curious place. You listen and you just understand the world.
Yeah.
Then I had a few experiences with it where I was like, oh, I don't think it's quite as caring as I pictured.
Yeah.
And so I think leadership development I found in London when I was working in an investment bank, which is where you get to recruit talent in and then not just recruit them and bring them into this world, but the most exciting thing is how you get to develop them.
Yeah.
And you stay with them and then you see them change. So once I experienced that early on, that definitely led me to, getting trained in being a coach and learning how people's minds work with adult behavior and design. And yeah. And then the more you do it, the more fascinating and rewarding it is because people develop in millions of different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important things ever. Like it's just, we're on the planet to experience and have happiness and success, and developing people, you get to play a small part of that.
Mm.
Like, how will you find your happiness and how could I help with that and unlocking potential and all of those pieces.
Well, I think what you guys do is a pretty big part of someone's, journey. Having an advisor myself, like there's something that that person would share with me and it kind of
Mm.
impacts, not only your business journey, your personal growth. So I think what you guys do is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just think about it has to come down to the person. It's like being told, like, look, it's just like knowing isn't doing. You
Yes.
know you
So
should do
true.
something, but you don't actually do it yet. So at the end of the day, it is down to your readiness or your
Yeah.
receptiveness to hear it.
Mm.
But it's definitely an honor to notice it and share it with somebody and then watch it change.
Yes.
Like, that's killer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's I also always say, someone can advise you or you give you advice as much till they're blue in the face. But if you don't actually take it on board to actually put in the hard work and do it, it's not going to ever work.
Yeah. And actually that's probably the piece about that I feel strongly about, even with advising, Tracy, versus coaching. And I feel like it's far easier to give advice and, we're a leadership development company. So we do lots of training, or
Mm.
I would say leadership development programs, or we provide content and our own IP and strategies.
Yeah.
But coaching is truly like being an expert at asking somebody else in such a way that it's safe enough, but
Mm.
it's caring, but it's insightful, that they'll come to their own conclusions. So that piece, I think, is amazing because people feel it inside and then they don't question their own confidence. They've been asked something, they think about something differently and they do it and it stays inside them.
Yes.
Yeah. Versus almost like it's easier to just tell someone this is how to do it. It's harder, but far more lasting to ask them questions that they experience it for themselves. So that's why I love coaching so much too.
Yeah. And thank you for explaining the difference, I guess, between, coaching and being a business advisor, because I think a lot of
Mm.
people think they're the same, but in some ways,
Yeah.
I guess they're different, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And Kim, what are some of the biggest, I guess, challenges that you see leadership, people who are in the leadership roles, what do they struggle with?
There's a few things. I think at a core level, they struggle. They actually struggle just to listen to what to trust themselves, actually.
Mhm.
They just struggle to block out the noise, to truly listen to how did I read it? What is the best decision for me? Because because there's so much noise around us, because we're executing, because we're easily advised by others or susceptible. Or so I think there's something about that, which in a business context sounds like, oh, I never have any space to think.
Yes,
That's
I
always
hear
what I
that a lot.
or a CEO who's trying to be strategic but then pulled down into the weeds.
Mm.
So um, that's how do I make really good decisions by myself if I haven't been taught how to have even self-care.
Mm.
So that's one theme. Another theme is definitely how can I just maintain my performance, which is of course about self-care.
Yeah.
It's of course about navigating and doing all these things for your whole self. That's a huge theme, especially with the sense of burnout. And so many more clients now, because I've been doing leadership development time, for years are now talking about just how to keep going,
Yeah.
and they're on the edge.
Mm.
Yeah. And then I think another one is always managing teams. You've got leaders who they're trying to balance being genuine, they're trying not to micromanage, but really they're trying to create greatness and expand a culture and get their team empowered and doing all of these things themselves. So how do we do that when there's lots of change?
Mm.
And of course, that's a thing. There's always lots of different evolution happening. Yeah, probably those three.
And I guess with the self-care, because this is something I've learned that's really important the last 2.5 years. If someone is in that mode where they just kind of go, 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 how would you suggest that they kind of start that self-care of looking after themselves better?
I think the most effective way is you have to just take a step back and look at the impact of it.
Mm.
I would literally suggest, which takes a lot of honesty, because most people know, I'm really beat or I'm tired or I'm not happy. They know that it's not that. They don't want to admit it, and they don't want to act on it, or they don't know how yet. So if you truly wrote down, for example, simple exercises, if you wrote down how much time you spent with your family versus work, how many days you ended up happy at versus not, they're all things that clients have done, and that helps them first. If you wrote down the impact of the fact that they go from meeting to meeting, and we all do back to backs, well, what's the impact of that? So, or even if you just did a little bit of a diagnostic over a week, how do you spend your time? When are you planning for the future? Oh, I'm never planning for the future. When did you exercise? How do you I know what else, Tracy. I could keep going.
No, please do. I'm loving it.
The tiny things. If I just ask somebody, oh, how'd you recharge this week?
Yeah.
Oh, what do you mean? If they don't have a recharging regime, I'm like, red flag. So that just helps. Like, what do you mean? And then I talk about all the things I would do weekly to run a business, to support coaches, to have 3 children, to like manage my relationship, like millions of things.
Yeah.
So, but first you need to know something is not working as well. Then how do I start little things? And also just how normal it is. We aren't taught these sort of messages. We're just taught to keep going and push through, right?
Yeah.
Culture. So even I find that the same with doubt. Like everybody thinks, thousands of hours of coaching with really impressive leaders, that this question about, oh, well, why me? Why am I having this doubt? Which really frustrates me, because I really want everyone to know how normal it is to have doubt, or how negative our thinking is, and to spend far less time ruminating and having all those thoughts, because you can't actually be successful or drive performance if you waste all this time. So if you just knew how normal it is, well, then you could figure out and you could name it and do all these things and just move forward, instead of, oh, why do I keep doing this?
Yeah. I think so many of us do that, and we kind of ruminate about the same thing. Is there like a tool or a prompt? I know Mel Robbins has like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 snap out of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything you could recommend, Kim, that to sort of help, people when they do get in that rumination process?
Yes. I think first part would be like definite awareness. So for example, if I gave you a piece of positive feedback, Tracy, if I said that's, wow, you're so articulate on this podcast. What's the chance that you would actually go, oh, I'm not just articulate, I'm actually very professional and clever, and you would one up it, right? Let's say it's very low, right? Very, very low. However, if I just said, if I gave you a negative, if I criticize anything, where would your thinking go straight away?
Down.
Yeah, it would remind you. So if I said you stuttered or made something else, guaranteed your thoughts would go back to a memory that you had on not presenting well, or what you first thought when you're going to do podcasts. So I would trigger that.
Yeah. Actually, as you said that, my brain still went, because I choked up on leadership earlier. I was like, oh.
Yeah. So
amazing.
if you just truly knew that is ridiculous, right? Look at that disproportion. Like positive, your thoughts won't, but your thought. So how much control do negative thoughts have? Your mind will immediately grab it. So I really want everyone to know that, and almost to experiment with it and to play with it.
Yeah.
And most times our mind goes back to a really negative memory, some message that we got, not even valid. Years ago, a terrible boss, anything like that. So that's a negative thought spiral. So firstly, if you just knew that and you thought about the research, there's a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative thoughts. You know how this plays out when you do performance reviews?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, when you get the performance review and your boss says, wow, there's 5 amazing things. And right at the end, they're like, it's just this one thing.
There's one thing. Yeah.
For 2020, for the future. Which one do you think about? You think about the one, right?
Yes, always.
If you really recognize that, you would start shielding yourself all the time from those thoughts. You would think differently about negative influences in your life. You would think differently about, you would prep yourself up. So I do all sorts of things before I do a keynote because I'm obviously going to have some sort of negative self-doubt that pops up. I'm never going to be impervious. I could do it for years and years and years, be amazing, have all this feedback, but I'm still going to be prompted by something. So now I just think how normal that is. And now I do the Wonder Woman pose. I do Amy Cuddy's thing. I do self-talk. I do breathing. I do all these things to get me in the right space so that I can just let go of this thing. And I don't think it's just me. I just think it's normal.
Yeah.
Actually, even how you saw Aviana before I did the podcast.
Yes.
Obviously, this is my first podcast.
Oh, so, I realize. How
this is my first one. So, like anything you do for the first time, you have some sort of discomfort that it's worth pushing through because it'll be a beautiful experience.
Yeah, well, thank you
for
me.
I hugged my daughter.
Yeah,
a strategy to be like, this is joy. This is what I'm doing in the world. I don't need to be perfect. And that is a way of minimizing this, normal operating system negativity for all of us.
Oh my gosh, Kim, well, you're natural. My goodness, I didn't realize this was your first one. And I'm stoked. I'm the first person to have in a podcast. Watch your space.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so crazy, that little experiment that you just did there, because as you said, the negative thing obviously went to where I choked up when I said leadership earlier on the podcast, but then my mind went, I did a presentation at WA Leaders, one of the first ones. About 4 years ago. And that's where my mind went, where I was just like sweating like I was dying. I was so freaking nervous. Was stumbling on my words. But again, it's a nice reminder of like sort of where we kind of started and then where we've kind of, got to. So yeah, it's crazy, like that negative, positive thing that you just did.
Yeah. And emotion, like anything that has a strong emotion in your life, it's almost like triggers your fear.
Yeah.
If you just thought about how anybody could trigger your fear at all points in time, you'd actually create like more of a protection, right? You wouldn't be as influenced. You wouldn't be thinking about, what does everyone think about me? Because you would realize anything they said would mess with your system. That's how I think about my brain. It's just a very messed up operating system.
Yeah.
And so you'd be really intentional. So noticing at first, thought spirals. So really the trick, going back to your question, is also like, how many negative thought spirals can I have? Thousands today. I'm going to have 35,000 decisions that I make today, 60,000 thoughts. So I'm just going to clock it. And the way to get out of it is to clock it, but not put as much pressure to move past it. Just be like, how interesting.
Yeah.
And to reframe it, like, what's the positive thing? Or my husband and I text each other sometimes. So I'll have like something negative happen, which I know will get me into a spiral. I'll text him. I'll text him it and he'll reframe it back. And then just that changes my positive perspective. But people can do that for themselves too, obviously.
Yeah.
So just less pressure as well plays into it.
Yeah, I think it's also nicer when it's coming from someone else, because sometimes I'm my own worst enemy and we kind of you try to do the positive flip backs. But again, it's training your brain to be more like that. But I think Tony Robbins does a similar thing. After all his years of presenting, he always says he primes himself before he goes on that stage and he hypes himself up, because we're all human at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you told me that early days. I remember being in London. I saw he was a British Olympian at a keynote. And it was before I'd done a keynote. It was early on in leadership development, daring to dream. And he was amazing, thousands of people. And I went up to him, but I was also doing some type of speaking in front of audience and I was still getting nervous. And it was really annoying me because I just thought, okay, I should be over it by now. Yeah. This is what I love and I'm going to do forever. And I just asked him like, how do you not look nervous? What do you do? And he just asked me one question. And he said, well, do you care about what you do? And I was like, yeah, I deeply care. Like I want, it was more development and training and workshops. I want everyone to really be impacted by what I'm saying. And he's like, well, me too. So The minute you don't care anymore is the minute that you'll get up there and thinking, there's nothing better, and you'll have no feeling,
Yes.
no nerve.
Mm.
And honestly, that I remembered forever, ever, ever. And when I did the Destiny Rescue keynote, same thing. I just thought about, I have these beautiful butterflies that's always in the same place. This is because I really care.
Yes.
I don't feel the gravity in the same way. And
Yeah.
that to me is really relevant to leaders and to confidence in general. We put all this pressure on ourselves for millions of things, especially at senior levels, which we do a lot of coaching in and leadership, that you can't have that thought, or you should be. It's like a terrible word, should,
Yeah.
in itself.
Yeah.
But if your thoughts could just be a little lighter, that are like, no, it can be like this. Like, I can be really good and nervous.
Yeah.
I can have doubt for a second and still be confident. Then it wouldn't mean as much. So it doesn't mean as much to me now. I don't self-judge. That's why I go back to confidence. Like, we're all getting in our own way in some way, but we're not able to see it all the time. I'm like, what sort of system is that?
Yeah.
So it's a completely messed up system. So then I feel really drawn to be like, right, let's talk about it, and then, make meaningful change.
Yes. And please tell me more. The Wonder Woman pose, is that just like a stand tall before you do something?
Yes, it's Amy Cuddy's work. You do it for 2 minutes. There was a lot of research on it in New York.
Cool.
She first came out with that. I think she called it, it's like a superhero pose.
Yeah.
The point is, you are using your body and physiology, which is definitely true research-wise, to take your thinking away from negative thinking to like channeling positivity. So she did research. Hers is, there's lots of different opinions to that particular research. Like, you could honestly skeptically just say, well, just standing there for 2 minutes could get you in a space.
Yeah.
For me, it works because it gives me intention. But 2 minutes of calm, just back to journaling, where I can think about, I've got this. Wow, look at the experience I get to have. This will be amazing. How nice that I get to share. All those messaging happens, and I use my body, and I use breathing. So there are 3 things happening which are reframing something really normal. And normal is the self-doubt and not trusting, all those things that are opposite to performing.
Yeah. And it's actually quite, you just feel stronger as you kind of, push your shoulders back, and you just instantly, I sit like this for the rest of the interview.
Yeah. Well, and they looked at it the opposite way, Tracy, where they actually looked at interviewing, where you really had to be confident.
Yeah.
So they had all of these people in the test do this, where you just like bob down and hold your, like, in the most negative version. And then they did that for 2 minutes, and then half of the group stood up really tall doing this for 2 minutes and smiling. So using lots of physiology there. And then they came in and interviewed them. And disproportionately, the ones that had all this negative body language, like, actually had a poorer result than the other ones. So even if, exactly. And I find that to be true in general. I think physiology, like how we use our body and self-talk and what we do before these crucial moments, are underestimated. Just like negotiating. I don't negotiate sitting down. I pace because I feel clearer. So there's these things that I'm like, why would you just use your mind if you could also use other tools
as well?
Or even the fact that we go into meetings like back to back, and we have really high stakes influential meetings. So, all the business leaders we teach, you need to be very focused, and yet your mind scrambled because you just came and you're still thinking about next steps.
Yeah. And Kim, at this moment, I need to grab my charger. So you keep on talking. I'm just going to waddle over here.
So space. I mean, that is my point. When you're back to what is needed in leadership development, everyone's super smart. They already have this beautiful smart. What they need is to intentionally be reflective, intentionally make decisions that serve them. And that starts with having enough energy. So that's the recharging regimes. That starts with also not walking into a situation where you've got no prep. And prep is 30 seconds. 30 seconds of, what do I want in this meeting? What's my state? So I'm not scrambled.
Yeah. So those are some questions
Very
that
relevant.
one could ask yourself before you kind of go into, I guess, a meeting, a networking event.
Yes, definitely. I
Mm.
still, even though I've been taught this years ago, I don't go into any client meeting without goal. How will I start the meeting? What sort
Mm.
of questions I just write down 3 questions I'd like to ask, and then ideally how I'd like next steps, but how I'll ask them that. The only thing that's probably changed along the way, because I'm, driven like you are, I would
Yeah.
go into networking events with, I must come home with 10 business cards, right? Because then you get
Laughing 'cause
carried
it's true.
away with setting goals. So I want to separate it. It's hugely impactful and underdone as in
Mm.
a term that business leaders who I hear the inner workings of all the time don't prepare as well as they could. And I'm not talking hours. I'm just talking thinking about who you're talking to, what state they're in, what tone. Here's a question, and here's how I'm going to set context.
Yeah,
Right?
it's a bit more
That's a
intentional.
really easy tool,
Mm.
intentionality. Over here, though, for networking events, now I go into it more of I just want to connect and talk about, I want to hear from other people. So I have less pressure that I must have a lead. Same with being on the phone, same with doing business. Like, let me tell you how we do leadership development, which is about knowing yourself and trusting yourself and being yourself. And it's about confidence. And this is what I have found, and I know to be true from my experience in life, which happens to be in 3 continents.
Yeah.
So if I say that to somebody, not like that, but if I'm talking about, the downside of Tall Poppies syndrome, or how I think business owners should play big, not small, or what are we wasting all our time questioning our own confidence? Like,
Yeah.
so if I talk about those things and it resonates with somebody, well, then that's true and things will happen anyway.
Yeah.
So
That's a
that's
good
where I've
perspective.
probably evolved myself versus
Yeah.
it must happen now.
Yeah.
But
I'm
again,
still
less
work in
pressure.
progress.
Yeah, less pressure, but more that is actually self-belief. That's it happens in a way that I can't perfectly plan. I definitely like to let go more. Because I like to have, I'm a high performer. I want to plan it all out perfectly. And I found in business it's just not the way it happens.
It's definitely not, because I'm a bit the same. But yeah, it just
Yeah.
doesn't always go according to plan. So, but I like how you said, even if you just take 30 seconds, this is something I could probably improve on before
Mhm.
you go into a meeting or a networking event, instead of just going like guns blazing, like I often do. Actually just be more intentional. And I think even for your own peace of mind, like you said, it actually helps you just settle a bit more into things.
Yeah. Because if you think about that whole monkey brain, if you just truly accepted, oh, I'm always thinking and distracted and there's a million things, which is
Mm.
the enemy of happiness and performance.
Yeah.
It's like there's 12 things instead of just having calm focus. That's why people don't know what they want. It's one of the hardest questions to ask somebody, like, what is it you really want? Because there's,
Yes.
like you're so distracted, but then because we're coaching and doing women's leadership, we hear the real answers after a while when they really trust you. I'm like, and it's a really important question. So
Yeah.
if you're not distracted, then you could be less judgmental on yourself. That's where the whole self-doubt comes in. And you could just be confident, believe this is what I want, and I'm going to ask for it.
Mm.
I'm just going to ask for it in a way that feels right to me, and then we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let things, I guess, flow a bit more naturally as well.
Yeah. But it's not that it's not planned or structured, because you actually trust your own expertise and you also have a little bit of prep. With a little bit of prep is, for you or for meetings or, yeah, because that's what I find in coaching, like business owners or leaders, there's so much going on. So they really value just an hour of space so they can actually
Yeah.
do high value thinking.
Mm.
But also it's, we're helping them listen to their own voice.
Yeah.
That's what we're actually doing. And then mirroring something back and having people think about it. And so that's actually why everything that we do is really experiential. Like I think I could teach you 12 different strategies that I've learned along the way, but I'd rather ask you questions that really impacted you.
Mm.
So same with, the team performance that we did, or we want to do something that changes people over time, which would mean you'd have to hear a question and think, oh, that relates to me and I'm going to do something about it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think one of the best things I ever heard as well, because I am a recurrent perfectionist, someone said to me, is Trace, just view everything as an experiment, because I mean, I was driven, trying to do everything 100%, and you almost half kill yourself in the process because you've got this unattainable ceiling that you're trying to reach all the time. And I felt that
Yeah.
really just helped me chill out a bit and take things
Yeah.
in my stride a bit more.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
Mm.
I always think about baby steps. Like everything's a baby step, everything's sort of a pilot and the experience and leadership. So instead of just same with business owners, like, how do I get from A to B in the quickest
Mm.
way
Yeah.
possible? Is generally the high performing question. Now, I've worked in investment banks where, time is money, everything's immediate. So
Yes.
that is really important. We want to achieve as much as we can. You want to value results. You just don't want to do it in a way that, and this was what happens again and again, you get to be and you're not enjoying it,
Mm-mm. Mm.
or you get to be and you miss the lesson, or you get to be. And so the lesson along the way. And I actually think it's really important to celebrate all of that process because that's life. That means you are being reflective
Yes.
and intentional, irregardless of the outcome.
Mm.
We just had that happen. I just literally experienced that.
Yes.
If I have time to tell you about it, you
Of
tell
course,
me.
please do. Yeah,
Yep.
please share. Yeah, that'd be
Um,
great.
with because this year's the first year we entered awards.
Yes, I remember
Before
you
now I was
saying.
hoping, um, as all businesses do, people will just find you by themselves. This year I realized, okay, it's probably worth us actually getting additional credentials to
Yes.
understand. So anyway, we went to quick version. We entered the Telstra Business Awards. It's nationwide. We entered it for the work we do with accelerating women, which I'm really proud of. Do it internationally in the US um, and anyway, there were 3 rounds. So each round was incredibly in depth. Took 5 months
What?
process that we've been under. I think we must have written something like over 10,000 words, like a
Wow.
ridiculous amount of essays. I've curated all these videos, so many things. And so there's sort of 2 parts to it, and it just happened recently. So one, when we were doing incredibly hard work, which meant we weren't focusing on client work as well at the
Yes.
time, doing that, we just kept thinking about everything we were learning
Mm.
for the team. So, we've created this, we got greater clarity. What did we learn, even if we didn't get through to the next stage?
Mm.
So we were positive, but learning
Along the way.
along the way. And that was a really beautiful experience to have with the team. I had to let go. They did these beautiful strengths along the way as to what they created, add the
Yeah.
arts involved. Like it just became a whole thing that expanded our business and we learned
Great.
even more about ourselves. And yeah, we sort of celebrated that, even though there was 22,000 applications there initially, Tracy, and
Wow,
we
that's a lot.
found out we got down to this final stage, but we didn't get through.
Oh, but that's still amazing though. I mean, what a
But
process and to
yeah,
go through. And it sounds like there's been a real growth experience amongst everyone as well, which
yeah,
is priceless. So you
yeah,
guys won in that way, which is awesome.
yeah. And I did. I just thought, okay, well, I think it's about 20 in the state for our category. So that's a tiny number out of this big number.
Yeah,
But it
I'm
would be very
goosebumps.
easy. Like the old me could have done, well, we were in at A and I wanted to win it, which of course, we do. And
Yeah.
that didn't happen. So instead of judging it by like that, I think about all the other things along the way. And I think that's for business too.
Mm.
I want this, you want this. We've got a map of how it happens. So when it doesn't happen, it can crush you and it affects your confidence. And then you go back and you spiral. I'm like, no, that's actually what decelerates leadership or life versus, okay, the good old, there was something to learn from it and moving on. But
Yeah.
people move on quicker. Mm.
Yes.
Yeah. So that just came to mind.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And again, well done. I think something really important you've touched on a few times is just reframing things. It's so powerful
Mm.
because, again, going back to that exercise you do with me, the positive and the negative, just simply
Yeah.
reframing something it can impact your psyche and your day so much more positive as opposed to just going into this downward spiral, which I often used to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for that, Kim. A really effective tool.
Yeah. Not suppressing it,
Mm.
which I feel like everyone's had experience with too. So I'm definitely a proponent of accelerate your performance in a way that's honest.
Yes.
Yeah. So be honest. This is the emotion. Write it down. Talk about it with your team. This is a mistake I made, like whatever the realm that it's in.
Mm.
Um, and then balance it and navigate and recharge so that you can perform and drive your own happiness. Yeah.
And Kim, I'd love to know why do you think, there is such a thing as tall poppy syndrome? Because I mean, I'm of the mindset of there's abundance for everyone and I cheer people on, but it's not always the same. Like, why do you think people are like that? Is it their own insecurities or self-doubt or?
Probably think two pieces. I think because it's a cultural
Mm.
influence. So
Yeah.
if I think back on Australia's history and cultural influence and where might that come about, well, it's such a equal sort of society. It's
Mm.
not too extreme competitive. It's not too capitalist, like ingrained in us, even in the mateship and how you kind of grow up. There's these beautiful messages of we're all in it and let's collaborate.
Yeah.
So that implies if we're all in it and it's very equal and there's not, it's not English royal family status,
Yeah.
then we should kind of stay equal and it should be fair. Like think about these words that are really pervasive in Australian culture. And we're all working on the land and farming once upon a time. So then it implies, well, we should stay at the same level.
Makes
It
sense.
doesn't sort of allow for, but I'm going to do better. And when I do better, I would feel really proud and just tell everyone about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think about that culturally as in, okay, well, that's why we have humbleness as a core value. I personally find humbleness is often used as a way to say play small. Like, so don't take risks. Don't do it because of what somebody else might think. Actually, I found that for Telstra. Like I went and told everyone we entered it. I
Right.
put it so just on purpose without knowing how it would turn out.
Yeah. Good.
And I was hoping the right people were happy that we are achieving. But the people that weren't, well, I suppose they wouldn't really maybe be thinking of the same in this abundant space.
Yeah.
So it does take bravery to celebrate things along the way and be like, I am really proud of this. And most important, so that's the cultural context. And you've got all these messages around being humble, which is different. But how are you going to grow if you don't get to share what you are doing?
Yeah.
So the leader who's driving the team performance, he or she wants to share, wow, look at the impact I had, just
Yeah.
like you did. You get to be proud of what you've done with your business. And the more we say that and share it, the better we feel about it. And then beautiful, other people who are inside our circles will be supportive. So that's how I think it came about once upon a time. And then obviously like lots of skepticism. It's the easiest thing in the world to be negative, critical and skeptical and to look at someone else and want to pull them down.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's just the easiest way to do it. But I don't think that's the best way, obviously.
No.
And I don't want to be a part of it. So the Tall Poppies piece is like, well, how could everyone stand tall? And we could all reach your potential, be the most confident. And then we're not as affected by self-doubt or other people's negative opinions. And I think that's the freest, happiest way to live.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I'm doing in the world. Like, amazing. The end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a journey. I'm not saying it like I've reached it. I still think there's things that I'm doing with it. But that's the freest, happiest, like I'm just following what I want to do in the world when people can do that. And then that's it. They achieve it and they feel amazing about it and they deserve that.
Yes.
Why should we be getting in our own way, Tracy? It makes no sense.
It doesn't, no. And I can say, Kim, like your energy, the way you carry yourself, even when I saw you that day, Destiny Rescue, you're just so in your power and it was just so inspiring and so great to see. So
thank you. Trying.
You're doing really well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kim, before we start off, I'd love to know what is one piece of advice you would give business leaders?
Business leaders. I was thinking about owners first.
Oh, owners, yeah.
Yeah. Just because that's so much of a lens that what I'm in as well. I think I would come back for both and think about for business owners, you must trust your vision and dream. You just must, which means you'd have to let go along the way and trust all the other people around you. I think that's one of the hardest things to do when you've got a baby, which is what a business is.
Yes. Yeah.
Then you need to be reflective about yourself and self-aware so that you can actually be intentional and not distract. So that's how I think it plays out if you own a business. With leaders, same thing. I would go back to so important to know you as a person and the impact you're having on the business as the CEO, as a team. When you've got that, you'd be thinking about I just want them to know you have to recharge. I think if leaders just knew it's natural to have doubt and then they came back to, I'm doing the best I can in this way because I'm aware. Just that combination of things would drive you really, really far.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing.
More than one.
That's fine. The more the better. Kim, where's the best place for our listeners to go should they wish to connect with you?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn. So this year we're sharing a lot more about our work. So join
Right.
us on LinkedIn, Tall Poppies, on the website, www.tallpoppies.us. And I'm expanding into Instagram where we're
Oh,
sharing
good.
more about thought leadership. We even have something online, Tracy, that people can do for themselves, like 1 hour
Cool.
leadership. And it's just a great starting point before you then, get involved with our content. But just join us so you can see some of the thinking that will help you day to day. That's really what I want to do. Have little snippets that people wake up to, feel inspired, feel more confident, and then they go to work and ask for what they want, get it, all of that.
Yeah,
So
great.
yeah, you get that on LinkedIn or Instagram, website, reach out. Yeah.
And where is that link, Kim? The hour that everyone can do, is that on your website?
Yes, I think it comes up as a prompt. It's called the Confident Leadership Module. That's a way of just immediately enhancing your own, like knowing yourself more, trusting yourself more, and being yourself. There's like 10 different exercises people can do for themselves, which ignites your confidence as a starting point. So that's one
Yes,
piece.
that's great.
And then, yeah, if you like to be constantly topped up with thought leadership, then join us on LinkedIn in our community because we're creating 1 million tall poppies, which is like
Yes.
billions of people around the world who stand taller for themselves, and we get to be a part of that.
Awesome. So we'll definitely pop all the links in the show notes as well. Kim, thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad that we finally got there, despite everything in the tech and my computer almost dying on us as well. But thank you so much for all that you've shared.
Resilience.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed our
Resilience,
conversation.
Tracy.
Yeah. Cheers on that. I'll have a drink.
Thank you so much. That was really lovely. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.